I have watched this sport for decades, watched generations of talent come and go, but this whole situation with Neymar right now, man, it's been eating at me. If you want to know the exact second his 2026 World Cup dream died, you don't need to look at a hospital MRI scan. You don't need to analyze a tearful press conference. And you certainly don't need a tactical breakdown of his declining sprint speed or expected assists. You just need to look at a meaningless, quiet recovery session in Santos, and in one 8-year-old kid who accidentally showed a king his own mortality. Now, let us zoom out and look at the actual landscape. For the past year, the narrative surrounding Neymar's return to Santos was supposed to be a fairy tale. The prodigal son returning to the Vila Belmiro, the very same pitch where a skinny teenager with a mohawk once redefined what Brazilian football could look like for a whole new generation. For the young fans who grew up watching his YouTube highlight reels, he is the ultimate street football icon. For the middle-aged traditionalists, he has always been the last lingering bridge to the golden eras of Ronaldo and Ronaldinho. Everyone was waiting. They were holding their breath for the resurrection. There was a crucial Copa Sudamericana fixture looming on the horizon. The cameras were set. The stage was meticulously built for the hero's triumphant return to form. But the reality of a footballing body in its twilight is far less romantic than a marketing campaign. Behind the closed doors of the training center, away from the stadium lights and the roaring crowds, Neymar has been fighting a silent, losing battle against time. The injuries are no longer just physical setbacks. They have become psychological anchors weighing him down. The explosive acceleration that once left European defenders grasping at shadows is gone. The superhuman agility that made him untouchable is fading. And when you are a player whose entire identity, whose entire global brand, is built on the premise of being untouchable, the sudden realization that you can be touched, that you can be caught, is utterly paralyzing. This brings us to the training pitch. A standard, low-intensity recovery session. The kind of session designed purely to keep the blood flowing, usually devoid of any real stakes or intensity. Enter Robinho Jr., 18 years old. Fast, fearless, and carrying the exact same youthful arrogance that Neymar himself possessed a decade and a half ago. In a simple one-on-one drill, the teenager drops his shoulder, accelerates, and leaves the veteran behind. A clean, undeniable, and entirely normal sporting defeat. In a healthy ecosystem, this is where the veteran smiles, taps the kid on the back, offers a word of advice, and the session moves on. But what followed was a violent, chaotic physical altercation. A slap. A complete and public breakdown of decorum. Every major sports network, every pundit from Rio de Janeiro to London, is framing this incident purely through the lens of indiscipline. They are pulling up his past red cards, his partying history, his squabbles at Paris Saint-Germain, and tying it all into a neat little package titled Neymar's lack of professionalism. They are asking if the Santos manager has lost control of his dressing room. They are debating whether a fine or a suspension is the appropriate disciplinary action for striking an academy graduate. The media is talking about a loss of discipline. They are calling it a moment of madness from a spoiled superstar who cannot handle a bad day at the office. But they are missing the point entirely. The generous reading of this situation is that it was simply a flare-up of competitive tension, a moment of red mist that happens at every football club in the world. The less generous and entirely factual reading is something far darker. Nobody is talking about the deep psychology of what just occurred. That is not a loss of discipline. That is a physiological panic. What happened on that training pitch wasn't just a foul or a momentary lapse in judgment. It was an ego death. It was the terrifying, uncontrollable reaction of an apex predator looking into a mirror held up by an 8-year-old boy, and realizing, for the very first time, that he is no longer the danger. He is the prey. And worst of all, by losing control in front of the cameras, he has just handed his biggest critics the exact political weapon they have been desperately searching for. Let us break down the exact sequence of events, because the details matter immensely. The footage and the internal reports from the Santos training ground describe a standard one-on-one offensive drill. On one side, you have Neymar, the global icon, the player whose entire brand was built on humiliating defenders with impossible agility. On the other side, you have Robinho Jr. He is 18 years old. He is fast, he is hungry, and crucially, he carries a very specific historical weight. To understand the gravity of the reaction, You must understand the relationship. When Neymar was a skinny kid breaking into the Santos first team, Robinho was the established king, the idol he looked up to. For the last decade, Neymar has played that exact same older brother role for Robinho's children. He is not just a senior player to this kid. He is family. He is the ultimate authority figure, the untouchable legend of the household. So, when Robinho Jr. receives the ball, drops his shoulder, and explodes past Neymar with the kind of raw, undeniable electric pace that Neymar himself used to possess, a psychological boundary is crossed. Neymar is beaten. Not by a seasoned European defender executing a perfect tactical trap, but by a teenager relying purely on youthful biomechanics. What follows is not a standard tactical foul to stop the play. It is a desperate drag down, followed immediately by a physical altercation and a strike to the face. The media will tell you this is a player who has simply lost his temper. They will call it a classic case of a superstar throwing his toys out of the pram. That is not a temper tantrum. That is a primal, physiological panic. When an elite athlete, particularly one whose entire identity is predicated on being physically superior to everyone else on the pitch, suddenly realizes that their body can no longer execute the commands sent by their brain, the reaction is rarely logical. It is an existential crisis happening in real time, in front of an audience. The 8-year-old kid in that drill was not just an opponent, he was a mirror. A ruthless, high-definition mirror reflecting the harsh reality of Neymar's physical decline. The slap was not aimed at the kid. It was a futile, violent attempt to shatter that mirror. In the world of elite sports, when your legs betray you, your ego is the last line of defense. But ego cannot defend against raw speed. It can only lash out when humiliated. For young and middle-aged fans who have watched this man command the pitch for over a decade, witnessing this lack of control is deeply unsettling. It shatters the nostalgic illusion that class is permanent, reminding everyone that while technique might survive, explosive dominance comes with a strict expiration date. And this is where the dressing room dynamic shifts irreparably. The players watching this unfold, both the young academy products who idolize him and the senior players who rely on him, see something they cannot unsee. They do not see a demanding captain setting high standards. They see fear. They see an aging king desperately lashing out at the very concept of youth because he knows his own time has run out. The aura of invincibility, which has protected Neymar through countless tactical failures and off-pitch scandals, evaporates in an instant. In a dressing room, respect is a currency built on utility. The moment your teammates realize you are no longer the solution to their problems, but actively creating new ones out of your own insecurity, the hierarchy collapses. The silence that followed the altercation was not a silence of respect. It was the heavy, uncomfortable silence of a collective realization. And while the Santos hierarchy scrambles to do damage control, sending out PR statements, and downplaying the severity of the clash, the true consequence of this moment is echoing thousands of miles away. It is echoing in the offices of the Brazilian national team. Now, we must leave the training pitches of Santos and travel to the headquarters of the Brazilian Football Confederation in Rio de Janeiro. While the domestic media continues to debate the length of his inevitable suspension and the moral decay of his character, the true implications of this incident are being coldly calculated behind closed doors by the national team setup. The generous reading of the CBF's current public silence is that Carlo Ancelotti and his coaching staff are deeply concerned about the psychological well-being of their all-time leading goalscorer. The less generous and entirely factual reading is that Carlo Ancelotti is breathing a massive silent sigh of relief. To understand why, you have to understand Ancelotti's entire managerial philosophy. Throughout his legendary career, Ancelotti has been the ultimate pragmatist, a master at balancing fragile egos and demanding absolute dressing room harmony. Look at his tenures at Real Madrid. He is famous for the raised eyebrow and the relaxed demeanor, but beneath that grandfatherly exterior is a ruthless political operator who knows exactly when to cut a declining star loose to protect the collective. He operates with one non-negotiable rule: no individual can generate more media noise than their on-pitch contributions can justify. For the past year, Neymar has been Ancelotti's most complex political problem. How do you quietly phase out a national deity? If Ancelotti simply dropped a fit Neymar for the 2026 World Cup because he no longer tracks back, or because his transition speed has vanished, it would trigger a national crisis. The traditionalists, the powerful sponsors, and the deeply nostalgic Brazilian press would have crucified the Italian manager. Every dropped point in the qualifiers, every missed chance in a friendly, would be met with deafening demands for the return of the number 10. Neymar was a tactical burden, yes, but dropping him purely for footballing reasons was a political landmine that Ancelotti was too smart to step on without armor. This is exactly why the incident with Robinho Jr. is so catastrophic for Neymar, and so incredibly convenient for the national team manager. Ancelotti did not need a drop in form to justify leaving Neymar out. He needed an undeniable moral failing. He needed an action so toxic, so universally condemned by the public, that even the most loyal defenders of the Jogo Bonito era could not defend it. By losing his temper and physically attacking an 18-year-old kid, especially the son of a trucer, respected former teammate Neymar has handed Ancelotti the perfect excuse on a silver platter. We are no longer talking about expected assists, pressing triggers, or injury records. We are talking about the fundamental safety and emotional stability of the squad. In international football, tournaments are won in the hotel corridors and the dining rooms just as much as on the pitch. Imagine the dynamic inside the Brazil camp. You have a new generation of hyper-professional, physically elite athletes who operate like machines. Introducing an aging, volatile superstar who cannot even handle a training drill without resorting to assault is the fastest way to destroy that meticulous culture. A player who lashes out violently when his ego is bruised by a teenager is not a leader. He is a walking contagion. He is a liability that threatens the fragile psychological ecosystem of a team preparing for the most high-pressure tournament on Earth. Therefore, the decision to exclude Neymar from the 2026 World Cup squad will no longer be framed as a tactical choice. It will be framed as a necessary measure to protect the integrity of the team. That is not a footballing decision. That is a political execution, carried out with completely clean hands. Ancelotti does not have to face the cameras and criticize Neymar's declining physical metrics. He does not have to argue with journalists about legacy. He simply has to point to the Santos training ground footage, express profound disappointment in the lack of professionalism, and quietly close the door forever. The greatest trick Ancelotti will pull off, heading into 2026, isn't a tactical masterclass. It is allowing his biggest problem to solve itself. Now, consider the immediate aftermath. Santos had a crucial Copa Sudamericana fixture approaching, a match that should have been the sole focus of the club, the manager, and its supporters. Instead, it was completely eclipsed. The tactical preparations, the opponent analysis, the pre-match press conferences, all of it was swallowed whole by the gravitational pull of Neymar's implosion. When the media cycle ignores a continental competition to obsess over a training ground slap, it tells you everything you need to know about the scale of the distraction. This is the exact media noise that elite managers dread. It is an exhausting, inescapable vortex that drains the energy out of a squad. Every single player stepping up to the microphone to discuss the upcoming matches, instead forced to answer questions about their veteran teammates' anger management. The collective identity of the team is hijacked by the fragile ego of one individual. For a manager trying to build a cohesive, winning unit, this is the ultimate nightmare scenario. There is a completely valid version of this story where some might argue this is simply a media overreaction. You might think, surely, an apology fixes this. Surely, a public reconciliation with Robinho Jr., a PR-managed handshake for the cameras, and a few vintage performances on the pitch will sweep this entirely under the rug. After all, football has forgiven far worse transgressions when the player in question is talented enough. Legends of the game have survived training ground fights, red cards, and public scandals, provided they delivered on a Tuesday night in the Champions League. You might be waiting for the inevitable redemption arc. But that logic relies on a fundamental misunderstanding of how modern, elite dressing rooms operate. In football, a player's immunity to discipline is directly proportional to their match-winning utility. There is an unspoken equation in every club and national team. As long as your on-pitch production outweighs the off-pitch circus you bring, the ecosystem will protect you. The moment that graph inverts, the moment you become a greater media liability than a tactical asset, the ecosystem forcefully rejects you. Neymar has unequivocally crossed that threshold. He is no longer scoring the goals that justify the circus. He is just the circus. When a younger player looks at Neymar now, They do not see the player who dismantled Paris Saint-Germain in the remontada. They see an unpredictable, volatile presence who might turn a routine Tuesday morning recovery session into a global PR crisis. That loss of respect is terminal. You can recover from a bad game, and you can recover from a physical injury. You cannot recover from becoming a cautionary tale to the very players you are supposed to be leading. And this brings us back to the ultimate prize, the 2026 World Cup. For Neymar, this tournament was supposed to be the grand finale. It was the final opportunity to close the circle, to deliver the trophy that his talent always promised, and to finally step out of the heavy shadows of Pelé and Ronaldo. But the door to that narrative has now been permanently slammed shut, not by a tactical masterclass from an opponent, but by his own hands. The 2026 World Cup was his lifeline, the one remaining stage large enough to validate his career choices over the last 5 years. He needed Brazil far more than Brazil needed him. By handing Carlo Ancelotti the undeniable moral high ground, Neymar has essentially signed his own international retirement papers. The era of building the national team around his moods, his fitness, and his entourage is officially over. It is a harsh reality to accept, especially for those of us who grew up mesmerized by his undeniable brilliance, but we have to face the music right now. When you step back and look at the whole picture, the trajectory is devastatingly clear. Neymar will not wear the iconic yellow and green jersey at the 2026 World Cup. We are not just witnessing the end of a single player's international career. We are witnessing the definitive, ugly death of the pure, unfiltered Jogo Bonito number 10 era. The next generation of Brazilian stars, the Vinicius Juniors, the Rodrigos, the Endricks, they are built differently. They are European-forged tactical machines. The space for a free-roaming, volatile artist whose ego dictates the dressing room temperature simply does not exist anymore. Ancelotti knows this. The Brazilian Federation knows this. Deep down, even Neymar himself knows this. That training ground slap was not the cause of his downfall. It was just the final, undeniable symptom of a decline that has been happening in plain sight. It handed the executioners the perfect excuse to do what they have secretly wanted to do for months. The king is dead, and the entire court is quietly relieved. But I want to know where you stand on this. Tell me in the comments what you actually think. Did Carlo Ancelotti just get the luckiest political break of his managerial career by having Neymar sabotage himself? Or does a player of Neymar's historic legacy still deserve one last dance in 2026, regardless of the media circus and the off-pitch drama? Is that risk still worth the fading magic? Come back to this video in the summer of 2026, when the final Brazil squad list is officially announced, because I guarantee you, you will not see his name on it. If this kind of deep dive into the unspoken politics and dressing room psychology of football is exactly what you come here for, hit subscribe. We do not just watch the ball here. We watch the complex men who play it. Take care, and I will see you all in the next one.